Welcome to the Hunter's Campfire. G'day, my name is Mark van den Bogart, hunter, fisherman, writer and storyteller. With me is Ian Hurley, technologist, hunter, hunting mentor and proud father. Together we want to help you get hunting. Our focus is helping you make the most of public land hunting right here in Australia, even if you don't live in a state where it's offered. This podcast series is all about helping you get started, helping you build your knowledge and your confidence so you can get out there and live your own hunting adventures. Now, let's get started.
What is Purdy?
Purdy? Oh my God, mate.
Should I know this?
Yeah, you
Is
should.
it your uni degree? Or
You should know what Purdy is.
why?
Purdy is like one of the great gun makers of the world, particularly
I
English.
shouldn't.
It's an English
I'll edit that out as well.
Purdy and Holland, you know.
I know.
Probably the two greats, and then there's Boss. But I think probably the two greats would be Purdy and Holland. So yeah, and
Right.
what those are is they're actually shotgun cleaning cloths. So they're the cloths that you put down on your bench when you're going to clean your Purdy. And I've got relatives who live relatively close to Purdy. They actually live just near Lords, and they went in and bought me a couple of those things, and they send them over to me every couple of years. So they're a cleaning cloth that's been framed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing that you could afford to get out of
Yeah,
the shop.
well, I've got
I
a H&H cap, and I got a cleaning cloth, and I actually on my 3006 I have a Holland sling, which is an expensive sling, but that's about as close as I get.
All right. Well, I'll confess as to not knowing what that was. It's the way of the world when you're I guess not. I think I said on one of the other podcasts I wasn't a gun enthusiast. I use them as a tool, so I don't know some of that history. But anyway, we'll call that an intro, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Hunter's Campfire. I'm well, it's not live because by the time you hear it, it'll be recorded. But coming to you live from another cold Toowoomba winter evening. Where are you held up, Mark, today?
Well, we're in Brisbane, and it's not that cold tonight. We had a bit of rain last night, and it's kept the temperatures pop back up. But we have been, I think, for the most of the month, we've been below average, which is a good sign. It's actually we're actually having a proper winter. I was up on a block outside of Kilcoy 2 Fridays ago, and as I was pulling in, it was 2 degrees, and the little car had a little symbol which I had a look at, which was ice. I don't think I've ever actually seen that symbol on my car.
It's a common symbol. When I first picked up my new car a couple of years ago now, I picked it up and drove to Victoria to go hunting, and that was its first trip, I think. And the symbol came up, and we were driving up through the night. We left Toowoomba and went to Victoria non-stop, 14 hours to get to where we were going. Just did a couple of driver changes, and that same symbol came up. It was an ice symbol with a couple of crosses through it, or a tire or something.
Yeah.
And I looked and I thought, is my car stuffed? What is this engine warning light coming up on my dashboard?
That's exactly right.
Anyway, out come the manual, and we sorted that out pretty quickly, and off we went. But that's the way it goes.
I've figured out mine kicks in at 4 degrees.
Yeah, right.
I was watching it because it came on, and then once it got up to 5, it disappeared. So it must kick on at 4 degrees, but it was 2 degrees when I pulled up in the block.
So, excellent. Yeah. Well, hopefully this rain disappears. We're supposed to have 4 days of it leading up to the weekend. This weekend, just coincidentally, is our Australian Deer Association local branch AGM. So we've got 30 or 40 people coming with their own camp oven mixtures to stack around a fire and have a bit of a camp oven cook-off. So that'll be good for the fellas and wives and families to get together and have a bit of a chat about that, and issue some awards for the year and whatnot. So that should be a fun weekend if the rain goes away as forecasted. Otherwise, it will be dead set miserable. But we've all dealt with that.
So that actually sounds, I didn't know that because of different branch, obviously. I wish I knew because I've just last weekend I prepped some venison, and boy, I got it right this time. Oh,
Oh,
wow.
did you?
It's almost gone. The kids are just chewing through it.
Oh, yeah. Well, my wife doesn't
Meatballs,
eat it. My son
meatballs,
sometimes does.
meatballs, burgers, that kind of stuff, and obviously
Oh,
the steaks. But yeah, so and hopefully next weekend we'll get away on a family trip a family hunting trip that my son and I go on each year, and that's we go for if down for fallow, and we usually try and bring back a fair bit of meat from that. And I'm going to have a go at sausages. I've never
yeah,
done it,
great.
so.
Yep. Traditionally, with the intestine
Oh no,
tube,
none of
or
that crazy
picked
stuff.
up by
No,
no. Okay,
yeah,
maybe that's
got
next
this
time.
machine that has this tube that you just and hopefully it just pours out and I wrap them up and away we go.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm far on the in the hunter gatherer, you know, I'm way on the hunter side of the scale here. I'm not real crash hot on the food prep. I'm getting better, but I'm not real crash hot on the food prep side of things.
yeah. Oh, you'll enjoy making sausages. You can do all
Yeah.
sorts of things. So experiment. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's down in New South Wales somewhere, but New South Wales, we're talking about tonight, the Pilliga,
Hmm.
to follow on our deep dive into some of these parks. We're going to lean on you quite heavily tonight, Mark, because I've been there once and sounds like it's your second home nearly. So um, yeah, it's a massive park, isn't it? You have a look at if you
Yeah.
rate the park by numbers that can hunt it on the New South Wales app, it's in the I think 300 people can hunt it at any one time, whereas the park that we spoke about, which was Severn last time, fluctuates between 2 and 4 people, depending. So to give you an idea of scale, this place is enormous. What makes up the Pilliga?
So it's an interesting term in itself. It's certainly not just associated with the state forest. The Pilliga is an area that's really, and if you looked on a map for New South Wales, it's really a stretch of scrub that goes from Narrabri down to Coonabarabran, which is I think about 100 kilometres. And then to the east, it goes to the next road right across, which is about 30 or 40 kilometres to the east. And to the west, it stretches in a similar fashion out to the west. So it's famously called what they call the Million Wild Acres. And that was a term by a guy by the name of Eric Rolls, who wrote a book about it. In so much as what you hunt, you tend to hunt the way that the hunting from a state forest point of view is broken up, is you actually hunt right in the middle. So the state forest kind of sits in the middle of that whole area, and then around it is various national parks, conservation zones, and private property. So you tend to be right smack bang in the middle. And so what that actually means is that when you're hunting it, you're a long way from anything, or you can be. You can be a long way from anything, which gives it its real appeal, especially to me, because it's. I like to think of it as, it's the average Joe safari. You can go to the
Yeah,
NT, you can
absolutely.
go to Africa, but you can go to the Pilliga and you kind of get the same kind of effect. You can be 35, 40 kilometers away from the road. You can do that if you want.
You can walk for days,
You could walk till
literally.
you run out of, you could walk till you got in a bit of trouble if you were unlucky. Um, it's that large. And the other interesting thing about it too is when you book it for a hunt, you actually got to realize, how big a chunk of land they give you. It's massive. The block itself, so there's a number of forests there. The two main forests is Pilliga East and Pilliga West. There's a couple of smaller forests around. And so you can book Pilliga East, which is on both sides of the Newell Highway, and the small part of the east, which is on the far eastern side of the Newell. It gets a bit confusing. That's the small side, and that itself is massive.
Yeah, right.
Um,
I haven't looked at that side. I
mm,
turned right off the highway heading south out of Narrabri onto Pilliga Forest Way, heading to the main campsite feature, which is the well. What's it
yep,
called, Mark?
it's Wages
Something well.
Ball. Yeah.
Oh, the Boar, yep. So down
Boar.
to the Boar, and I think I travelled at a reasonable speed. It's a reasonable access road into there, and I think I must have gone 40 minutes in the car before I got to that spot. Yep. Just to give you an idea again of distance, I wouldn't have been doing 100 kilometres an hour. I was probably closer to 60 or something like that as an average. I'm thinking it's been quite some time, but it's a reasonable track, forestry road. So I had to have gone 30-something kilometres.
So generally, to get to the Boar, Swages Boar, which is one of the big camping areas. I mean, it's not a big campground, but it's one of the areas a lot of people go to. From Narrabri to the Swages Boar is about an hour in a car. So if you're feeling like you need some milk, it's a 2-hour journey to get that milk, and a lot of that's on dirt too. So Swages Boar is by no means the end of it. It's basically kind of in the middle. You've got a fair distance either way from the Boar, and because you can with an R license book 2 forests, if you book Pilliga West, which is relatively small in regards to Pilliga East, in that it's about a 20 by 20 square kilometre block. I mean, it's not small again, but it's the smaller block. You've got a significant chunk of exploring to do. So whereas, and I don't want to make anyone think that they shouldn't have a go at it or something like that, but what you have to remember is that when we spoke about Severn, we spoke about something that you could comfortably hunt in a weekend. Pilliga is a couple of levels up in terms of your commitment, in that if you think you might be very lucky in driving there on the first day and see something, but you might not. And it might take you 4 days to actually find the game in there. So you could spend a lot of time pursuing game and not really find any because it's sheer size. So it's something you've got to give consideration to. The other thing you've got to give consideration to is your ability to kind of be in camp and have an enjoyable time in camp without having to rely on amenities. Because if you're relying on amenities, then you'll probably spend far more time driving to and from the amenities than you will actually doing any hunting.
Right, so self-sufficient for the 4 or 5 days that you're going to be there.
Yeah,
and that case, I mean, we like those sorts of things as a club and as a branch. Like I said before, we drag a camper and it's got a few 100 litres of water and kitchen facilities and the ability to charge and do things. Run your fridges and those sorts of things. So it's actually really good to take those sorts of things in there and stay right away and immerse yourself in the bush and just become part of it, because every time you go back out, you sort of lose some of those senses and those sounds. So I find that immersive experience is really good.
The longest I've stayed in the forest, I think, is 6 days in total. And it's very doable. It's not hard. What we did though is that in terms of just things like phone signal and being in touch with the family, when we would hunt, we would kind of over a period of time move towards where we could get signal. So there might be a day we go, we're going to hunt over this way, or we'll cross the highway and go hunt the other side, and then we can get signal. So, but again, you want to be self-sufficient, and not because of any danger, but to actually enjoy it. Because if you are staying close to town, you will be just doing a lot of driving back and forth. You'll be on that highway and on that main dirt road more than you'll be actually in the pursuit of game. And to me, that's defeating the purpose. So I suppose the way that we might start is the way I hunt the Pilliga is that I usually hunt it with a group of guys. And usually 3 other guys. So we go down there's 4 of us. We go down regularly. We hunt about every 18 months. We do a trip to the Pilliga and have been doing it since 2010. Oh no, actually 2010. It was a Christmas, New Year. And what we do is we go in convoy, and it's actually 3 cars. Now that sounds a bit strange, but the reason we do that is one guy actually sleeps in his car, so his car's set up for sleeping. So that is his accommodation while he's in the forest. But what it does, it means that we've always got a vehicle in camp because we hunt in pairs. So what we'll do is we'll get there, we'll set up, we'll find a place that we want to stay in. There's a Swages board. There's also, and the name escapes me, but there's a mill down towards the southern end of the. We've stayed there once. I kid you not, I heard the pigs in the creek fighting during the night, but I couldn't find them in the morning. They were in the dry creek. I could hear them. We couldn't find them. That was quite a nice place to stay. Open ground, soft sand. There's an old picnic table there. There's actually still the frame of the windmill. It's a nice place to camp.
I found that when I was there.
Yeah, there's a couple of other places to camp. None of them have any amenities. So other than maybe there's an old concrete slab and a picnic table. They even took the bins out some years ago. So there's no real amenities. It's just a nice bit of space. So we go down, as I said, we usually go down with three vehicles, and across those vehicles, we share the load in terms of the camp. So we build ourselves a pretty comfortable camp. One of my friends has a trailer. It's not a camper trailer, but it's set up for camping. So it carries a lot of gear. He's got the big esky in there and a fridge and a number of other things. Set up a big communal tarp. We set up our tents. As I said, one guy sleeps in his car. So we have a very comfortable camp in terms of things like fuel and water. We take in plenty of fuel and plenty of water, usually about 200 litres of each. So we'll share the fuel load. So, we'll take in, between 40 and 60 litres each, something like that. And of course, obviously what we fill up at Narrabri too before we go in. So we're running in with full tanks. The water, again, we'll take as much water as we can. One of the guys' cars got the water reservoir built in as a, and we also obviously take jerry cans, things like that. So we want to have plenty of fuel and plenty of water, and the water's broken up between drinking water and working water, as I call it, washing up water.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's really those amenities for the vehicles and for us. And then, of course, food. We share eskies. Most of us have got some type of car fridge system, so we make sure we've got enough cold storage as well as for game meat, which is a big part of it, but also for food. So we've got a pretty comfortable camp. So and the reason for that is, one, we want to enjoy this, and two, again, you don't want to have to be going, oh look, I've lost me 10 pegs, they're going to shoot in town. You just don't want to be doing that. You really don't want to be doing that. You're just wasting so much precious time doing that kind of thing. So over catering, my advice is, if you're going to go in, over cater. It's better to have a little bit more.
Do that on these sorts of trips anyway, Mark, don't you think? I think just about all of these trips you tend to over cater for food and whatnot, but water's the big one. Not wanting to go back out for water seems to be one of the big ones, because it's an easy one to churn through, especially if you can't see. I mean, the one thing I say about camper trailers is a lot of camper trailers don't have a level. You can't see how much water you've got. I know when two of us go away, I've typically got enough water for 5 days. That's washing, that's drinking, that's all of that sort of stuff. But I can't keep an eye on it, so I'm always taking more jerry cans just in case, which is important. But Swages bore alludes to water. Is that going to trap some people?
Look, well, I've never seen Swages bore dry. I have heard that it's gone dry, and I know that recently it's been in flood. I've never heard it dry, but then again, I've never drank from it either.
Sure.
I've used it. I've used water from the bore to clean clothes. I've done that after 3 or 4 days. I thought, I'll give these things a bit of a wash in the bore. I've done that, and I've used it. Mostly for cleaning. I don't think I've ever used it even for cleaning plates and things like that. So what I tend to do is I have a fairly clear delineation between drinking water and working water, because I can get away with, if I have to, using bore water to clean up with, but I'm not drinking bore water. So I make sure that I know exactly how much drinking water I have, and that's simply, prioritizing me over dirty dishes type thing.
Yeah, you answered that in a completely different way to what I expected. And the reason I say that is I think that when I drove in there, I stayed at Swages bore. I'm sure of it, but I don't recall there being anything that made it look like a bore. So describe it to me. What makes up the bore? What if there's water? Is it natural? Is it pumped from a windmill?
It's an interesting term, and I've actually looked into it. So, and actually to get an understanding. So, the reason why they refer to bores in Pilliga was that once upon a time, a lot of the work in the Pilliga, because it's a working forest, was done by bullocks. And so these are water points for bullocks, and often they had a windmill there to pump the water up, or there was a natural soak, and I believe Swages Bore is a natural soak point.
Right.
Now, so you don't see like a metal object
casing
or a pump or anything like that. What it is it's actually not much of a spoon dam. It's a small dam. So you could very well look at Swages Bore and not see the bore if you didn't know where the dam was. It's very close. It's just there.
I didn't see it.
But it's not something that sticks up. It's one of those dams that's a scrape, so it's actually basically at ground level, then dips down, rather than being like a metal bore. There is a couple of windmills, which again, and there's actually I think it's in the northern block, there's a windmill with an old tank still along a creek line, and again I believe that was a water catchment area for the bullocks, but that's why Swages Bore is named Swages Bore. There is actually my understanding there's permanent water there. I've never heard of it going dry. I've seen it low, but I've not seen it dry.
Well, that's interesting. I'll look out for that next time I head there. And I have a renewed interest in wanting to go back there. Well, so I'm looking forward to it.
The funny thing about the bore is the bore often has goats on it, but that's a no shoot area.
Right.
Yeah. It's because it's a water source. You will, and actually one of the goat traps that I've found is very close to the bore, but it's a no shoot area. It's classed as an exclusion zone because of that little campsite area. So I've, as I said, I've used the water in the bore occasionally, but I tend to just stay away from it. Other than it also attracts a great deal of bird life, so it's actually a great place to go look. You will see goats on it occasionally too, which is a little annoying, but they're in that space. They're safe, so you have to let them be.
Well, that'll explain why the goats do tend to be found around that centre location.
Yeah,
something you said before. You might struggle to find the game. We went there for our first trip. We stayed at that location. We all went off in different areas. There were probably 10 of us, five groups of two, all in different areas. And you can imagine your first, expedition away from where you were camped and everything is you're not going to go too far. You're going to sort of work in your area. Everyone found animals. Everyone found animals on that first day, and that must have been the reason. I don't recall finding that water source. So that's interesting.
Where the Pilliga Forest Way, which is the road that runs through the whole of the forest, and it is a gazetted road, and I believe the one that runs through Pilliga West is called the Western Way or something like that. Again, it's a gazetted road, and people use it because it saves literally hundreds of kilometres from having to drive all the way around. So they are roads. You very rarely will ever see anyone. You might hear the odd car on them, but you very rarely see anyone on them. But they are used. Actually, the last time we were there, the only person we saw was the grader operator who was basically tidying them up. And we had a little chat to him on the radio. However, the reason you probably saw game there is that is a point where the Forest Way makes that significant swing down to the south.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly a T-junction, but it's certainly a significant junction there at the Forest Way. You can keep going directly west, you can go north, or you can follow it around to the south and go down to the south. So it's a big junction point, and it's quite open there. And so whenever you're driving back to camp in the late afternoon and evening, when you see that junction, you know that you're pretty close.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that would be our camp. So, and I can't stress enough that, Overcater, and you'll enjoy yourself. In fact, what we generally do is on the last night we have this it's kind of a tradition. We have this massive fry up. We get everything that we haven't eaten, and we basically cook it up, and it's just Viking style, grab it, and chew it type thing. Yeah, and if there's a bit of goat there, that might end up there as well. So the game primarily in the Pilliga is goat. There is good pig numbers in there, but the pigs are often pursued by locals, doggers, so the pigs are very, very wary. In fact, I think the best way to hunt pigs in the Pilliga is to leave your car somewhere and go out on foot. I actually think the sound of cars is one of the things they're most wary of. And when I think about the times that I've done the best on pigs in Pilliga, I've been completely on foot, nowhere near the car.
Do you not find that that's the case for most state forests, though? Pressure cars definitely come together.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the ones like Nundle, yes, because Nundle has, I think you can dog it at night, even in Nundle too. So there's going to be that, there's going to be that association with cars. Severn, not so sure, because it's not really a place that you can do a lot of driving around on. But certainly Pilliga does have. There is a strong, and by no means do I mean poaching or anything like, but there is a strong legal dogging community within that Narrabri area, and they actively hunt the Pilliga. So yeah, I think that has an effect on the way that the pigs behave in that area.
I think it would. Yep.
So because of the general environment down there is dry, the smartest thing is to find water. But that's not always the case. I've been there when it's been really wet, and it's actually had the thing is, when it's really wet, animals don't need to go looking for water. It's everywhere, so it certainly changes the behaviour. But generally, the way to hunt the Pilliga is to think about water, and especially through the summer months where it just becomes, drier and it's hot too. It's over 40-degree days is quite common down there, through the peak of summer. So it's very hot. So water becomes a critical resource for animals, and they won't move too far away from it. So if you find water, don't necessarily sit on the water, explore around the water, and you're very likely to bump animals. And there's actually, I'll talk about it a little bit later, there's a particular technique that we developed to hunt water in the Pilliga. But the way we go around hunting in the Pilliga, because of its size, is that what we usually do, as I said, is we go down in groups. There's 4 of us, so we split up in pairs, and in the morning we'll get the big map out. Now, one of the what do they call it? One of the tips that I would give you, if you're going to hunt the Pilliga, go to the Tourist Bureau in Narrabri and get the tourist map of the Pilliga.
Right.
It is by far the best map that you can get of that area. I usually buy 3 or 4 of them and just keep a couple of them. And I'm sure somewhere around here in my office there's one of them. It's a big fold-out tourist map of the Pilliga. And it's got all the interesting things in there as well, like the salt caves and all this stuff. It's there. It's a tourist map for people to explore that area. So it's a great map. It's to be honest, it's far better than the paper maps that you'll get with your R license, because it's so expansive. And of course, it doesn't just focus on a state forest, it focuses on the whole region. So grab yourself one of those tourist maps. They're a great way to navigate the area. So if you use that and then start to use that in concert with your hunting maps, you get such a better idea of what's around and the road layout and so on. So get yourself one of those maps. And as I said, they're available at the Tourist Bureau there at Narrabri, which is directly across the road from a bakery that does very nice meat pies. So, it's not a bad place to go. So with that map in hand, what we usually do is we lay it out on the table along with the R license maps, which obviously give us the exclusion zones, and we pair up, and we don't have the same pairs every day. We rotate, so you get to hunt with everyone, which is great. and we say, okay, we're going this way, you go that way. And the reason for that being is, from a safety point of view, we know where each of us are going, and there's no way we're going to kind of cross over each other's tracks. And we generally say, okay, we'll meet here at lunch. So we'll pick somewhere on the map for lunch, and say we'll meet here. And what our usual rule is, if you get there at lunchtime and you sit down and start having lunch, if the other people don't turn up while you're there, we throw a set of sticks down and make a sign on the side of the track, like cross sticks. Reason for that is when the second pair arrive later and go, okay, the guys have been here, they've moved on. What we do is, if you come late, you pull it apart. That way, if you're back at camp at 8 o'clock at night and the other guys haven't turned back at camp, you drive to that point, and the first thing you see, okay, they've been here. They've pulled the sign apart, or no, they never got here. They didn't pull the sign apart. Okay, we know where they kind of were in the morning. Let's head that way and go looking for them. Because relying on things like CBs is great, but directional in there and distance you can cover. You don't get a great deal of coverage. So it's a way for us to have a pretty foolproof way to go, okay, for some reason when they left camp and they're heading this way, they didn't make it there. So we've got a general idea of where they might be.
It's a good idea.
So it's just a simple way, and we do it in camp. So what we'll do is, if we say, look, we're going to spend the day and we're going to go in a camp, or we're going to be in camp later, what we might do is like put a rock on the table, just so the guys have been here and they've left. They've gone and they've left. Everything's okay. And that's just a great safety, system that we've put in place. That's very, very simple. It's pretty foolproof. Doesn't rely on technology, and at least gives you an idea of where you are. And of course, if you think about it, if they're in trouble and you're kind of looking for them, you've got a geographic location to kind of work towards. So it gives you a better, just gives you a much more focused, if you're going to go look for them. And they might not be there in trouble, they might be in trouble, but might be serious. And they might have hit two flats or something like that, so they're just there with the vehicle, but they're waiting or they got bogged or something like that.
So let me ask you a question on that then. And I'm gonna ask this in a way that trivializes the Pilliga, and because it sounds easy, and I know it's not, but it's flat. It's scrubby and it's flat, and it's almost in a grid form, some of it, the way that the roads go. It's not like you're going into the snowy mountains where two people leave on foot and get stuck in a creek bed or fall down a cliff or anything like that. How much trouble can you get in a flat piece of land?
Well, I mean, you're right. You're not gonna, you probably won't die of exposure, and you could, if you're both healthy, eventually walk out to the highway. But that may take you, 12, 15 hours.
Yeah, sure. Meanwhile, you got a whole party of people getting themselves lost. Look, and I meant what I said. I'm trivializing this. I don't believe that it's that simple, but I'm interested because you put a lot of emphasis on, that communication piece and making sure people know where each other are and whatnot. It sounds more dangerous than it looks, and it's probably the case. Are there traps here that people need to be careful of? Or
it's a good point, and generally the way that you hunt the Pilliga is, because its size, you travel in the vehicle until you get to a point that's a likely point, and you go out and you explore from the vehicle. But very rarely do you explore maybe than a kilometre. You don't simply you don't walk those great distances. And the reason for that is because, it's so big. It's pretty, if you did that, you would really only be hunting a very small chunk of the forest. So generally what we do is, like, if we're driving, so we'll go, okay, we're going to hunt the northern part of the forest today. So we'll drive along, or we'll look at the map and go, look, there's a dam here. We want to explore that dam. So we'll pull up 500 meters before that dam, get out, walk around that dam, and only do a kilometer or two radius around that dam at the most before we come back to the vehicle. So you're not going to be in a situation where, if you get into trouble, you're going to be too far away from the vehicle, or generally not the way we approach anyway. You won't be too far away from the vehicle. Even if you do walks, the easiest thing to do, for instance, on the last trip, I did a lot of walking myself. And what I would do is, the guy I was with, he simply said, no, look, just not interested. And I said, okay, well, look, here's the creek line. You drop me off here. I'm going to follow this creek line, and I'll meet you here where it crosses the road. And that might be a 5K walk along the creek line. Might take me a few hours, but I said, I'll meet you here. So, we always have an idea where you were. And so if I got in trouble, they would, if I didn't turn up, they would walk the creek line and they'd find me. I did. That being said, on the last trip, I was pursuing game, and I got a bit too focused on the game and went, oh, bugger. And because I could tell with my GPS where I was, but I had about an 800 meter force march through some scrub to hit a track. That was not fun. And it took me a fair while to get through, basically scratch my way through that scrub. But even then, I still had a GPS and I know I was going. What we do with the way that we communicate is not so much that someone gets lost. I don't think that is the problem. What the problem is, vehicle problem, getting bogged, shearing a couple of tires, breaking something, and being stuck with the vehicle, and then following the vehicle.
And you could have driven 15 kilometers from camp,
that's right,
to break your vehicle. And I can see that. The other one that comes to mind, you're talking about hunting the Pilliga in summer. It's hot, water's a problem. Dehydration, if you get that wrong, is going to be on you pretty quickly. And of course, snakes. There's going to be a fair few wrigglers out that way, I imagine. So they're the ones that came to mind when I was thinking, okay, how much trouble can we get into here? And just like everything, if you're blasé about it, you're going to end up unprepared and in trouble. So.
And remember, you just the distance that you're dealing with here exacerbates that. So if you might say, I want to hunt the bottom block. It might take you an hour to drive there from camp. So you might be 30, 40 kilometers from camp before you start exploring. So having a breakdown there is, there's probably a highway, maybe one way or another, but if you're going to have to walk to that highway, you're going to be walking. You might be able to, it might be an easy walk, as in you're going to be walking on a pretty well defined road or forestry track, but you're still going to be having to travel 20 plus kilometers on foot. So having an idea where someone else, so simply you can go down and find them and go, okay guys, and give them a lift back to the vehicle, is going to make their life a lot easier. And that's just simply because of the distance you're traveling. I mean, once we were coming out, and we got a flat, and not a problem, fixed it, but we realised, we're about 20 kilometres from the highway and about 40 kilometres from Narrabri. So if you lost 2 tyres here, it would be, okay, you guys sit with the truck. We've got like a 3 or 4 hour round trip to get the town to get both flats fixed. So it's just simply it's a way of dealing with that size. It certainly exacerbates the potential for you to be in a situation that might not be life-threatening, but a situation you don't want to be in for a period of time. And that's why, we always make sure there's lots of water in the trucks. We take food that's the idea, is we're actually going to eat on the hunt. The reason for that is, one is you can hunt longer, but 2, you're actually much more sufficient with that vehicle. That vehicle has a level of sufficiency with it, and that's why it's great to have diesel in camp, so you can make sure the vehicles are never low on fuel. Just makes it all the more enjoyable because you're removing the risk factors out of it.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you some different questions then. One of the things you said was that the walk out is likely to be reasonably easy, just long. Is a pretty good description for the way I found the Pilliga, and that was that it was flat. Even the lookout tower somewhere in the middle of the Pilliga, they had to build a tower because there's no vantage point to get up high. Now, I've heard that there are some high points and some rocky points and some feature, but I didn't find any of that. I found grid, flat, scrubby sections. The highest thing that I had to climb was the contour bank coming up out of the drainage as you drove through them on the road. So, you can step over it. That's about how high it got. We didn't find anything much more than that, or sort of a creek system. But that's typical of the Pilliga. It is so big. I just hadn't found half the things that were in it. We found the bore, we found the odd windmill, and we followed some tracks, and we were pretty successful. So we didn't range too much further than that. But what else is there? What features do you find in the Pilliga?
One of the deceptive things is it's actually not flat. It slopes downhill towards the south. And so the reason I know that is if you go down to the very bottom road where it butts up against the national park, after a significant rain event, the amount of the energy and fury of the water that's run through that place is evident. It slowly runs downhill. So it is actually, it does slope downhill. Now, there is also points that are higher than others. There's one place we call the Highlands. Or what? No, the Highlands. Sorry, is what we call Severn. What do the guys call it? They call it Trophy Hill. And that's where you come out of the really soft sandy, and you start to get into the gravelly mix, and you start to get some elevation. There's also and probably the highest point that I can think of is closer towards the Newell Highway. So there is a high point up there where it changes dramatically. It opens up a little bit more. That's where one of those massive storms that went through there a few years ago and knocked a number of the trees down. You can tell you're a higher elevation. As I said, it's now, it's been cleared by the storm, and a lot of the regrowth is that weird regrowth where you get the stunted branches coming off the major trunks. And again, it's that really shaly, gravelly material. I find that you don't see a lot of game in that area, and I think it's simply because it doesn't hold much water because it's a high point. The water flows downhill, and that's where the game is. And so you see the majority of game in that really soft, sandy sections of the Pilliga. Towards the north, there is it's not higher, but the environment changes, the ground, the soil changes, and so you see more grass, you see a lot more closed in tree areas. So you start to come across little grass paddocks, obviously naturally formed after trees have been clear, but you get a bit of cover and you see grass paddocks. And so you do get differences in features, but it's very subtle. There's one area that is a very, very nice treed creek line that we did well with goats last time, and it's almost unpilliga-like in its appearance. It's quite heavily treed. Still a lot of native trees. It's an area they haven't logged of native trees. There's still a very strong creek line runs through it. Lots of shade. Lots of water was sitting on the ground, banked up against, in the banks and in little pockets and pools. Really good area to hunt. We got lucked onto some great game there. But that was again after the rain, so that fundamentally changed the way we had to hunt, because the last time was different. We hunted basically around the water sources, and we did really well. But this time, because there was so much water still on the ground, the game itself changed. So in talking about that, if it's dry, one of the techniques that we developed, that we developed maybe is overstating, but one of the ways we hunt the pilliga when it's dry is that, for whatever reason, we found the pigs, even if the water source is dry, there's obviously groundwater underneath and they can get to it. So they'll still hang around, unless it's bone dry, and it's a dust bowl. They'll hang around these soaks. So what we found is that obviously as you approach, they hear you and they move off. So what we've decided to do, or what we've experimented and worked very well for us, and I'm quite happy to share this, is that we work in teams. One person approaches, as you were, the normal track, which would be along the track or contouring the track into the other person goes wide, goes behind. And what invariably you'll do is you'll bump a pig and it'll go one way to the other. And so either the person who goes wide will get an opportunity for it, or the person who's following the track will get an opportunity for it. And we've been pretty successful with that. You go in there, you move the pig on, and then it's moving, and you're nice and wide, and you can both get a good clear view. One's on one side of the dam, one's on the other side of the dam, and eventually you'll get a clear view of it. And as I said, we put that to practice in a really dry period, and it worked very effectively for us. We bumped 3 or 4 pigs off various water courses over the period of time. When it was really wet, what we did was we realized that it was so wet and there'd been so much water around that looking at a dam was just absolutely, of no concern, because the animals didn't literally have to move from where they were to find water. So they don't need to travel to a dam, because all of a sudden there's a pool of water at their feet, because any creek line still held pockets of water. So what we did again was and as you've been there, as the many creeks crossed the track, every time we came to one of those little creek crossings, we would simply look at we would gauge the game activity by the prints in the sand, which generally was completely billiard board clean by the rain, and go, this one's very fresh. And if you ever hunted goats, you'll notice that billies tend to kick sand in front. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that. Yeah.
They kind of, I don't know if it's they're lazy or what it is, but they have that. They have the
drags forward,
the hook mark, and they have that drag mark. And,
yeah.
That drag mark is usually the best way to tell if it's fresh or not. The more moisture in that drag line, the softer the sand is, the fresher it is. And so that's what we were looking for. We were looking for that activity, especially we're looking for those drag marks. And on one particular instance, we just looked at this and went, they must be just here. It was that obvious. And so we started to walk this creek line, and I was walking in the creek bed, and my friend was walking up on one of the banks. And we came around a corner, and a tree had fallen into the creek, or basically the bank had been eroded by the amount of water that had gone through and pushed the tree in or fallen in. And all around this fallen tree, which still had green pick, were pig signs. And I literally thought they're going to burst out of here, but they weren't there. But they were so much pig activity, And it was bright sunlight, and I was looking into these dark shadows, almost expecting a little set of eyes to look back at me. We kept on moving along, and we kept on exploring and kept on following the tracks, and eventually we ran into the mob, and we certainly cleaned up the mob that day. And I'd gone from no goats to basically that afternoon was my afternoon of a 6-day hunt. That was it. I got all the animals. All the animals. I said my eskies are full. Unless I see a really, really big billy, a real, giant, that's it. I'm done. And so meat processing then for the next 4 or 5 hours, but that was it. And that was, so when it was wet, we just look for the tracks, and we're able to kind of go, these tracks are really fresh, and follow those tracks. So two techniques, depending on wet or dry, but they both produce very, very well. And there's also the the reality of when you hunt the pilliga, the more you're mobile, the more you're looking, the better chances are you are to find something. Be prepared to hunt long and hunt throughout the day, and you will find game. It's just that it's so big, it might not be right where you are, but you will locate it.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions from last piece. First one, and real quick answers, because otherwise we probably won't get through them all. So you've mentioned pigs and goats. Any other game that you've found? Expect to find?
There could very well now be deer in there. And to answer that, when we were down there in 2017 or 18, I can't think it was, right in the grip of the drought, we were speaking to the editor of the local newspaper, who was quite interested in what we were doing down there and actually ran a story on us. He said that because of the drought was the only thing keeping the general consensus was the drought was the only thing keeping deer out of the Pilliga. And they were saying as soon as the drought broke and the rains came, they expected to see deer. Now, I have heard of deer in there. I haven't seen them. And I do believe on the game report that there has been deer taken, not in the Pilliga itself, but one of the very close neighbouring forests. And I would assume if there is deer in the Pilliga, they're going to be on the east of the Newell Highway, because I believe they'll be coming up from that way. So they won't be coming in from the west. They'll be coming through from the east. So they'll be on the eastern side, more than likely on the western side. But these conditions keep up, and especially fallow. Fallow are a remarkable animal. I would expect to see deer in there. You will see things like the occasional bunny. You will see things like hare, and you will see foxes. There is obviously signs of wild dog in there. I haven't seen any, but there are obvious dogs in there. Though they do bait for those things in the national park. So some of the border roads where you're basically on one side is a fire zone because it's a state forest, and the other side is out because it's national park. You'll often see the little flags for the 1080 baits. Other things in there to be aware of that aren't there is there's scrub bulls in there, so there is wild cattle in there, and there is also wild horses in there as well. And I've seen both.
Wild horses. Anything else? That's a fair amount of game to put on a list.
Yeah. So, and of course, you will see a lot of the game bird life in there. So, you occasionally see the quail and the things like that, but there is, they're not necessarily on the game list for the Pilliga, but there is certainly bird life in there. The interesting thing about the Pilliga is that there's also a lot of myth associated with the Pilliga.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll get to that. And one of the things so just on the deer subject, on our trip in there, it was back when deer was still a game species in New South Wales, and they had a season, and we showed up in the Pilliga not expecting to see deer, and we were 1 week outside the season, and I had two new members of my branch walk straight into a deer in the central part of the Pilliga, not that far from the boar. They took a photo of it, and what was amazing about it was, firstly, it was a red deer all day, and secondly, it was pure white.
Oh, wow.
If you want to start talking about myths, we won't get there yet either, but just throw that in the middle of that. Wow. So we brought that picture back to our experts, so the people within the branch that, it was basically looked like a silhouette, and you could put the picture of this deer. It was a good photo to put the picture of the deer up, and you put that up against the cards that they use to choose which species it is. And it was a red deer all day. Mm-hmm. And until we told them it was white, no, it's definitely a fallow. It's definitely a fallow. There's no way it can be a red, because apparently there's only been 3 white-red deer ever sighted globally in history.
Okay.
Right. So there's a very good chance that it wasn't a red deer. But I tell you, as a silhouette picture and the size of the animal, the size you can only gauge off what the fellas that took the photo told us, because in amongst trees, there's not a lot of perspective about size, but
Yeah.
they swear black and blue, it was the size of a red, and it certainly looked like one. So that was really interesting to see. I'll show you the photo at some point.
What is, to be honest, what you find in there, it doesn't, I mean, I've never seen a deer. I've heard the deer in there, and I don't discredit that at all, because it's so big, It is so big. It's not unlikely at all. In fact, it's so big that they carved off 10,000 acres to create a bilby sanctuary up the top, and you wouldn't even know that they carved it off.
Oh.
So it is that big. So yeah, it could be. There could have been a farm around there who had deer.
Possibly, and that was our theory. That it was something that had got off a farm. But anyway, so that's that. I mean, and there's lots of options, I guess, to find in there. My other question was going to be, what is the most game you've taken in a trip as your group? And tell us about the largest trophy style animal that you might have taken out of there.
Sure. Look, personally, I think the best we ever did was 27 goat in a trip. The trip from the last trip we did, it ended up being, in terms of numbers, it ended up being a goat a day for everyone for the 5 days we were there. Didn't work out that way, that was the ratio. It didn't work out that way, but that's what it was. Taking 10 to 15 animals over a 4 or 5 day is not unheard of. It's actually, it's not that, it's quite common. It took us a long time to take a pig out of the Pilliga. Long time.
Right.
And if we're going to talk about the trophies, the first pig, and that was my good friend Simon, who was the first guy ever to take a pig out of the Pilliga amongst us. It's about that big.
Yeah. Tasty.
And we literally we'd crossed over the highway. So we'd been hunting the far east, and we'd come across, and we came to a T-junction. It was late afternoon, and we still had about a half an hour to get to camp. And we pulled up this T-junction, and I remember I was looking at the map, and there was commotion in the passenger seat, and I didn't really take much notice of him, and I was kind of looking at the map, and then, crack! I heard the shot, and I just looked straight out through from the driver's seat, and I was just going, what is he shooting at? What is he shooting at? And then I saw him running, and I thought, oh, he's running down the track. So I expected to see like a mob of goats on the track. And then he turned off the track and went to this little puddle on the side of the track. And he picked up this tiny little pig that was literally came out of the scrub and was drinking there, like 30 feet from our car. And that was the first pig so we actually that was quite a thing, it was the mythical pig. In terms of trophy, by far the 2 biggest goats I've ever shot have come out of the Pilliga. I shot a 32 out of the Pilliga, and I was pretty stoked by that. And then a couple of years later, I took a 36-inch goat out of the Pilliga, and with goats, the old rule was 36 was the start of the trophy. Of course, now guys, taking 40s and 50s, but I felt from a public land goat, 36.
Yeah, public land representative head, that's outstanding.
Was a ripper. And in fact, let's see. That's a Pilliga Billy.
Some character on that, isn't there?
He's he's fantastic. He's a fantastic animal. And so that's a Pilliga Billy. So yeah, that was he's 36.
Nice. All
And
right.
the interesting thing about him being 36 was, of all the things I took, I didn't take a tape, and we just went, "How big's he?" And I kind of like I was measuring him against the rifle and went, "Oh, he's pretty big," but yeah. And so it wasn't until we got him home, and he dried for a couple. He was still over 36, so he might have been a touch bigger when he was wet, but he's dry. He's 36, so and that's trophy enough for me.
For sure, that's outstanding.
So that's it. And there's other things like helping a friend get his first pig there. Last trip took away a guy, Jonathan. He came with us first time. One of our regular guys couldn't make it. Helping him get his first goats at the Pilliga was pretty exciting. He did pretty well. He got a nice billy on the last day. Saw a billy that was bigger, I reckon, but he got away from me. But they're there. And remember, these are pure. These are they're wild animals. They're all wild animals, but there is no. These are purely wild animals. So there's no potential that they've got to deal with all the things that a wild animal deals with. So getting a goat that big is that was an old animal that lived a fairly productive and exciting life. So it was good to take him. So that's probably my trophies out of the Pilliga.
When you were talking earlier about your strategy of hunting the water, the soaks, where you'd sort of split a little bit, the thing that came to mind then was what arms are you carrying? Right? Okay. If you were going, and the obvious answer is whatever you own, but if you were going to have your pick of the weapon, and this is not the ridiculous top end Purdy's of the world.
Well,
this
why
is
not?
if you were going to go with just choose the caliber, not the make, and the optics. What would you select for this type of hunting?
It's one of those questions where you get into a great deal of personal choice, and obviously what works in the past flavors the way you want to your choice. For me, I found to hunt state forest across a range of state forest, I want to carry a 30 cal. So I want it to start with a 3. And to me, for me personally, that's either 308 or 3006. So that's me personally. In terms of optics, most shots are going to be within or under 100 meters. Okay. Most shots are going to be within scrub, so it's not going to be like a nice clear view. So it's an animal. Either if you've lucked on it, it's still and it's stable and it doesn't know you're there, and so it's browsing, it's moving, but it's not moving with any intent. It's browsing, unless of course you're lucky enough to see a pig in a wallow, but it's going to be browsing. So there's going to be some movement, but you're going to have the opportunity to take a shot. But it may be moving through some incredibly heavy cover. So your sight window is quite small. So I want good optics at low power, and I want significant punching power. I want
deep sights, red dots.
If I could, if I was a younger man with better eyesight, I would love a peep sight or a red dot. But I'm not young and my eyesight's not great, so low power optics, 2 to 3 to 4 power is in fact 2 to 3 is probably where I spend most of the optic range on those very expensive scopes. Don't move much past between 2 and 3 power. And the reason I like that is and it's one of those tips that you learn, and it's a hard one to learn, is that when you're hunting a state forest, or when you're hunting hard and you're looking for game and you see game, you tend to get this massive tunnel vision.
Oh.
You just see that game, and being able to actually kind of pull back a little bit and say, okay, what's around here, is really good. And having a good eye relief optic allows you also, when you make that first shot, don't be surprised if something else doesn't bust cover. and being able to pick that up and make that second shot is important. So, and for me personally, I always prefer a box mag than an internal mag. I just feel more comfortable with a box mag because I hunt personally with an empty chamber. So I don't hunt with safety on. There's no chambered around when I hunt. So the first thing I do when I see game is I have to get into position to cycle the action. And I've done that, and people say, that slows you down, stops your opportunity. I know when I'm hunting with friends, we don't have loaded firearms, and it's just another thing that I don't need to worry about. But it means, of course, when I then take my game, I've got to cycle the action. So there's always that component to it. But then again, I also think if you're hunting in such a way that cycling of the action is critically important for you to hit game or not game, work on your stalking. Work on your stalking, work on your approach, work in your observations, work on, getting in a better position earlier rather than having to make that rush shot.
I think a lot of that comes with time and patience. When you start this game, everything that's in front of you is exciting. I mean, it's exciting even when when you've been doing it for years, but that ability to pull back and watch, because knowing you could have taken that shot, once you've taken a lot of animals is just as successful in my mind as taking it anyway. Leaving that and having a look. And I find this with deer all the time. If you're dead set and need to shoot the first deer to be, to make the trip a success, and I've been in those situations. I was in one of those situations recently. I focused completely on that deer. The other guys around me could see its buddies. I couldn't see those buddies. But at other times, I've potentially taken one for the trip, or I've got a full freezer and I'm mentoring rather than shooting. My eyes are wide open. You can see all of that stuff, but that's maturity in your hunting, I think.
Yeah, and look, I readily admit when I'll go away on a state forest hunt like that, we're gone through, multiple days. I like to get something early, and then I find that once I've done that, and I've kind of answered, okay, we've got meat, we've got that. Then the whole game changes, and I know that, for instance, one year we did for my 50th birthday. Oof. We did a 10-day road trip hunt. Okay, and I wanted to get a deer, goat, and pig on that 10 days, and I did. I got and well like those all those hunting shows. The goat was like the last bit of light type thing.
The easy one, right?
It came down to the wire. We did that, but that was a trip for 10 days that was hunting all the way up to that, because that's the personal milestone I set for myself. But a couple of years before, we were in the Pilliga, and it was one of those hunts where we were just always on game. And I remember about I think it might have the second last day we were there, I just kind of went, yep, that's enough. I'm done. I don't need to hunt anymore. And so in a way, it wasn't any kind of regret or anything. I just went, yep, I've had my fill of hunting. I'm just gonna, and I didn't put the rifle away, but the camera is in my hand for the next 2 days. Always had the rifle handy just in case something fantastic came along and you wanted something like that. But I went to the camera, and it was a different approach. The other thing that we do in the way that we hunt with pairs, you actually have an agreement between the two, is that one guy will kind of be the guide and one guy will be kind of be the hunter for that morning or afternoon, or even for that day. And I tell you something, there's a great joy in doing that too, to actually kind of go, mate, I'm going to get you game today, and so it's pressure, but it's a different kind of pressure.
Yeah, I agree.
And I find that really enjoyable, actually. And again, as I said, on the last trip on down, when we took someone who'd never hunted there before, or he may have been there once before, but never hunted with us before. I kind of went, mate, I'm going to get you game. And I remember when the day I got him his first goat, we were driving along, and it was tough. The first few days were tough because it was wet, and it was tough. We were traveling a lot of Ks and not seeing any game. And I remember we came across this rock escarpment, and I said, "Did I ever tell you how much goats love rocks?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, let's go on here." And sure enough, they were in there, and he got his first goat, and it was a nice billy too. It was a nice billy. That's it. So that was it. So that's actually, I think that's just as rewarding as actually getting your own sometimes.
I agree, 100%. The mentoring thing's important. Keeps the sport alive, gets people involved. Teaching somebody else what to do. Hopefully they'll teach someone what to do. Keeps us doing what we do, which is excellent. Hey, one of the other things I wanted to ask, we spoke quite a bit about the Boar as a campsite. Is that your favourite campsite? Where else would you point people to that were considering going in? Because that might have people in it when you arrive.
Now, what I would suggest, if because of distance, the Boar is really good because it gives you a nice jump off point for the northern and most of the eastern block, and also what's behind it towards the west. So if you look at the forestry map of the Pilliga, the Boar gives you a good jump off point for a lot of places. However, if you're thinking of hunting down the southern block and also possibly including Pilliga West in that, then I've found that Mill site to be really good because, again, it's just closer.
Yeah.
So you hunt different parts of the forest, and it's just taking into consideration the distance you have to travel, and so where you want to camp. But the Boar, it gives you a really good, northern eastern type of section. The Mill gives you a good southern and also into Pilliga West, section of the forest. I mean, you certainly can drive wherever you want, but that's what I found. I've never camped on the far eastern side, so the eastern side of the Newell Highway, though there is some very big water over there, big dams. There is actually also a couple of campsites there with dams. The campsites over there that we've found, they've often looked like they've been inhabited by people who've been camping there for a significant period of time, so we tended to stay away from them. But over the Boar is a pretty good place to go. And again, it's if you're thinking of going there for the first time, it's really easy to navigate to the Boar, so it's a good place to start.
Yep,
it's on the main road. It's on the main road. It's a great place to jump off.
All right. So let's round this off. The last interesting topic will be the mystery that sits around the Pilliga and your take on that mystery. I've heard loads of stories. We've seen some interesting stuff. So tell us a bit about your take on the mystery that surrounds it and the stories that are there. And then maybe finish that off with what is the most interesting thing you've seen, found, heard on your travels in there that sort of is kept a bit of mystery in and around the Pilliga?
Well, the thing about the Pilliga is people have been in there for a significant period of time, and I mean not both, post-European settlement and beforehand. So there's a great deal of history. There is Aboriginal cave paintings in certain areas of the Pilliga. There is the salt caves where people would actually go to mine salt. There's actually, and I don't mean like professional miners, people who lived in the area would travel down there to get their salt from the salt caves. So there's always been people in there. So there's lots of myth. Now, the big myths, or the most common one, is the Pilliga princess, which is an ethereal ghost-like creature that inhabits the Pilliga. I don't know why the princess is there exactly, or who the princess is, but there is a ghost story about the Pilliga princess. The Yowie is known to inhabit the Pilliga, and for those who don't know, the Yowie he's the Australian Bigfoot, or the abominable snowman, Sasquatch, or that thing. That's Yowie. He inhabits the Pilliga, or he and she, I suppose. more not so much myth, but more interest is that Jimmy Governor, who was actually Australia's earliest, probably mass murderer, hid out in the Pilliga. The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, which is a movie, is actually about Jimmy Governor. He hid out in the Pilliga, and he hid out along Bohemia Creek. A number of pretty dodgy people in settlement area have hidden out in the Pilliga from various times. Cattle duffing and horse thieving were, pretty common, and the Pilliga was a good place to hide out. The Min lights are associated with the Pilliga, which is, the lights that appear out of nowhere and do all sorts of weird UFO things at night. Do the Pilliga. However, in real terms, also the area is world renowned for its nighttime sky. So that's when you drive down the highway, you see those, there's all those astrological signs like, here's a great place to see Saturn and Neptune and Mars. That's why at Coonabarabran there's a fairly significant radio telescope. It's also world renowned for birds. There's actually a world renowned bird tour track that runs through both Pilliga East and Pilliga West to look for birds. So there's that kind of stuff in there. And of course there's more recent things, I think there's actually a movie called Something in the Pilliga. I think there's an Australian horror movie about that. It's called something, about rednecks living in the Pilliga and, doing bad things. So look, I've never really ever, and to be honest, I've heard people who've told me that they've hunted in there, have had experiences like that. I always find it a bit strange that, I'm in camp with 3 other guys and we're all armed, that someone would go, oh, I think I'll go bother these guys,
Yeah.
There's 4 guys in camp. There's 4 guys in camp, all with 30 cal rifles. Let's go bother these guys.
Yeah,
you would actually think that you would be the least likely to be bothered by anyone in there. But I've never heard it. I've been told plenty of times. People have been, have had strange run-ins. I've never seen it. I've never seen or heard anything like that myself. I actually find it quite. I quite like the fact that when I go there, we don't run into any other people. We don't see any other people. I think that's great. To me, that's a great attractor to it. That it's still a fairly remote place, so close to civilization. In terms of the strangest thing, I wouldn't call it strange, but it was something that stumped me for a while. Was that we would find these small trenches, not particularly deep, dug in the ground. They may be 2-3 foot deep and only say 200 mils wide and maybe a meter long, and they would be covered with boards. And we would go, what are these things for? Were they an abutment for something that was in the ground once and that thing's gone and this is all that's left? It was like a post hole or something like that. Weird things like that. What we found out is they were dug by beekeepers. Oh. And what they used to do is dig these quite shallow, narrow but deeper trenches, and they would put boards on top, and the bees were able to go through the boards, but nothing else was bigger and they eventually they'd pour water them, and they would also fill with rainwater. So they were able to provide water for bees, but a fox, nothing else could drink that water. So it was like creating these little water catchments for bees, because the Pilliga is also known for bees, because there's a great deal of, flowers and plants that the bees are attracted to. So you do see in the Pilliga a lot of beekeeping sites. You'll see,
you see that in a lot of state forests.
You see the hives and stuff, and the Pilliga is quite well known for it, and that's what these things are. It took us a while to figure those things out, but yeah, they're for So in terms of all the scary stuff, I've never ever encountered the scary stuff, but then again, unfortunately, I've never ever encountered the scary stuff. And every place I've been to that's had a legend about something scary, they always seem to be not there when I'm there. I wouldn't mind actually having the chat about it once. That probably the scariest thing I have ever seen in the Pilliga was once when we were hunting, and I realised something was looking at us, and what it was a scrub bull. It was just looking at us through the scrub.
That can be quite frightening.
Holy moly! I hope this thing doesn't come out at us.
Well, I didn't say this in the Severn discussion, but I was in Severn State Forest, and I was in a phase of my hunting where I like to hammock hunt, and I just sling a hammock and what have you. Severn's not really big enough for you to be backpacking around and doing that, but I slung my hammock, and it would have been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning that I got nudged awake by a cow. And if you can imagine a big fella in a hammock, nudged awake by a cow, absolutely shitting himself. There's a cartoon that you can probably think of a hammock going around in circles and arms and legs everywhere. That was me. I fair packed myself that night. Well, yeah. And I got up, and it was 2 or 3 cows' eyes just staring at me. I'd obviously put the hammock in their walking path. Man, that just got through the farmer's fence. To put some perspective on the Pilliga Princess, so I thought you knew the story, but there are a lot of truckies that will not stop on that part of the Newell Highway
because it is
such a legend. So the Pilliga Princess was supposedly an Aboriginal woman that used to be seen travelling that piece of highway. She was travelling between, I think it was Narrabri and Coonabarabran, as a bit of land. And funnily enough, they thought that she was probably the only Aboriginal person to be seen in that area for quite some time in history, because Aboriginals believed that the Pilliga was an evil land where bad spirits lived. Right, so she was travelling that piece of highway because her son had gone missing, and she was walking up and down the highway looking for her son. And one night, she got nailed by a truck that didn't see her. And the thing that freaks the truckies out was they used to see this woman walking up and down looking for her son. And after she died, they still saw her walking up and down looking for her son. And at night time, when the truckies were pulled over asleep, she'd knock on their door of the truck and ask if they had seen her son. And that's what freaks all of these truckies out in there. So that's the story of the Pilliga Princess. Not sure if that's the only story or whether there's variants of it, but that's certainly the one I know.
Yeah, I didn't know the Princess also very much, but look, I've driven that road both day and night, and actually we drove it at night with my family not so long ago. But yeah, look, it's a funny area in that it does have there is that legend and that kind of that ghost story associated with it. It's really interesting, it's just a chunk of land that's always had that for some, since settlement times, there's always been some kind of story attached to that place. And I have heard that, truckies won't, there's, truckies say they won't stop along there or something like that. Certainly the road between Coonabarabran and Narrabri is a great ride. I wouldn't bother stopping around. I'd get to Coonabarabran. It's actually a really good road. It's an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully that gives everyone a bit of an idea of what the Pilliga is like. It's huge. There's lots of opportunity. Get in and around and explore it. If you've got your choice of weapon, take a .3 something. And put a really low magnification scope on it. Be careful of your water. Get some really good communications within your group, so you know how to find each other if something does go pear-shaped. It is big. It could get nasty, and it can get very, very hot. Right, so just take it easy when you head into places like that. But other than that, Mark, unless you've got anything else, I think that's a good wrap of the Pilliga.
One more little quick story. And it's a funny one. We were driving down. So sometimes when you're hunting, it's actually better to drive out to the highway and scoot down the highway and then turn back into the forest, then try to cross country. Cross country. It's just faster.
Yeah.
And that was one of those days we said, hey, let's get down the bottom block for the afternoon and see if any movement along that area down the bottom. So that's what we did. We steamed out along Pilliga Forest Way, hit the highway, then then turned south and headed down the 110k down to the bottom end of the forest. And on the way down, Darcy was I was with Darcy, and we looked over into the Pilliga itself, and we saw one of the old Game Council signs when it was Game Council, and declared hunting zone. It was up in a tree at about 30, 40 feet up in a tree. Someone obviously got a ladder and nailed it up on a tree. And we looked at it, and then directly below that sign was a mob of goats. I went, that's not bad sign. That's not bad signage.
Chink, chink. Oh, very good. Well, hopefully we get a few more signs like that as we track around the place looking at parks.
Okay, well, look, that's probably it for me. I can't think of anything else. But as we say, if there is any questions that you have or you want some further information, by all means, please reach out and talk to us. I'm more than happy to talk to people about hunting the Pilliga and any other forest, but certainly it's a pretty special place for me, and I do have a fond attachment for it, and I'm happy to share that with other hunters. So if you've got questions, you got comments, or there's something specific you want to know, by all means reach out, and I'll certainly try and help.